Here are the 7 best opening traps to destroy the French defense, including the trap that Magnus Carlsen missed twice. And there is a pretty cool story about that, but for now let's start one by one. The very first one, which I really love a lot, is when you go into this classical variation where they pin your knight and therefore renew the threat to your pawn, but you ignore the threat and you just support your knight. After they happily snatch your central pawn, you can now recapture because your knight is still pinned, but you go pawn to a3, hitting their bishop. After the exchange, now there is no bishop anymore, and therefore their central pawn is attacked. They defend it, and you pin the knight, renewing the very same threat. But now there is not much they can do to counter that, so the natural move they can play is to counterattack your central pawn on d4. And what I really love about this whole variation is that all black's moves are very natural, and even strong players fell into this trap. You go bishop b5, pinning their second knight. Similarly, they castle, getting out of the pin. But now after the trade on c6, so that there is no threat to your pawn, you can finally get your central pawn back. And now due to this pin, you're actually winning the game. If your pawn does nothing special, you're going to bring also the queen out, put one more attack against this knight which is pinned, and you're going to, take it, expose the king, and win the game. There is only one move which black may try to fight back, and it's the move queen d5. Now, that's a really interesting try, I gotta say, because indeed it now threatens everything around. Now, after the trade on f6, it checks the king, so they have to recapture. Queen takes g2, now attacks your rook, and at first it looks like black is actually taken over, because your rook has been attacked, and if you play this natural move rook f1, then indeed after bishop a6, black wins the game. However, instead of moving your rook, there is the other move which turns the table, and it's a really spectacular queen sacrifice, queen f3. Now you attack the queen, you x-ray the rook, therefore you defend it, but of course the main question is how about them just capturing your free queen? Well, then rook g1 comes virtually with a checkmate. They can delay for one move, but that is a checkmate. And this position is also very common for black to go for the exchange variation, and here beginners to intermediate level players usually go knight f6, challenging your central knight. After the knights are exchanged, you then play knight f3, which looks like just a normal development move, but in reality it does contain a threat of bishop to g5 hitting the queen. Thanks to your knight, you do control the square, and therefore it is unpleasant. Therefore they go h6 to prevent this from happening, and now you go bishop d3, just developing your bishop. Now again, what I really love about this variation is that all your moves seem so natural that your opponent just doesn't understand that there's anything special going on. You move your queen forward, again, sort of like, preparing queenside castle or something like that, but if they castles, guess what? That is already a losing error. Mind-boggling. You go queen e4, creating this really simple checkmating threat of queen to h7, but it's not at all easy for black to stop that, because what can they possibly do? If they move this pawn, this allows their bishop to come out and grab this pawn and attack the rook, just totally destroying their castling, which is really bad for them. If they try queen f5, offering you this exchange of queens, you say, hey, thank you, but I've got another plan. I play queen to h4, and now that exposes this discovered attack to their queen. Now there are a few variations, and all are extremely cool. So, what can they do? If queen moves back, which was played in some games, there is a really cool finish. It's the move bishop g5. You're trapping the queen, and you let them capture a bishop because it leads to this checkmate. If instead they move their queen away, then you win thanks to this bishop sacrifice on h6. For example, if the queen comes here with a check to king, you need to counter with the bishop, but after the queen goes, now bishop h6, even though I've gave an exclamation mark because it's a sacrifice, but in reality it's pretty natural. It's quite clear that this king is defenseless and you're going to win the game easily. Now queen h7 is coming. If they're trying to block the diagonal, it's also pretty easy for you to finish it off. Then queen to h7 is coming with a checkmate. To those of you who skipped to this part of the video straight away, welcome into the video. Here's the trap that Magnus Carlsen missed twice. It occurred in the exchange variation of the French defense. Now after knight f3, black goes bishop d6, and now c4 strikes the center. What can black do about that? Well, black does not really want to take on c4 because to take is a mistake and because it allows white to develop their bishop with a tempo. Knight f6 definitely would be a possible move to guard this pawn, but sometimes in such positions this bishop g5 pin seems to be uncomfortable for black. Therefore, sometimes black would play knight e7 to avoid this pin by the bishop. However, this blunders the move pawn c5, And the fun part is, you can look at the screenshot and you'll see that there is somebody with the nickname of DrNykterstein who blundered this thing twice, even though managed to draw one of the games because he's such a great player. Now, since the username DrNykterstein seems to be a little bit weird, I had to make some investigation. Back in the day, Carlsen was known for terrorizing the internet playing under his DrDrunkenstein nickname because he was sometimes drinking while playing. Later on, when bullet-titled arena tournaments started to happen, he decided to take online chess more seriously, and he also switched his account to the new one, with the nickname DrNykterstein, because apparently the word nykter translated from Norwegian and means sober. But we can see that in case this trap, it didn't quite help. And here's our puzzle of the day. In this position, which by the way came out of the French defense, the white player played bishop g5, which similarly traps the queen because it has no squares to go to. However, the black player was an international master and he prepared the counter strike bishop takes f3, which counters the white queen. And your task right here is to find the winning move for white, and if you can, write it down in comments below. The following trap is very simple and elegant. So initially we go for knight c3, and now black decides to trade in the center. We discussed that beginners usually bring the knight out to f6, but this is in fact inaccurate. Pros, or just more advanced players, develop the other knight first, so that now, as they bring the knight and challenge your central knight, after the exchange they do not have to bring their queen out and expose it for your future attacks with this bishop g5 and whatnot, but they can recapture with the knight, keeping their position nice and solid. Now you can just continue your development, you pin the knight, they develop, you do the same, then you play queen e2, and it looks like it's time for black to develop this light square bishop. How can black develop it to an active square? Well, they usually try to go b6, trying to fianchetto the bishop to this long diagonal. However, strangely enough, this natural b6 move is actually a losing blunder, because you can trade on f6, eliminating the defender, following up with queen e4, double attack to the king, threatening checkmate, as well as the rook in the corner. By the way, I gotta tell you that this and similar situations, in my experience, is one of the main reasons why people suffer and why they can't progress at chess. Because this is the most common type of blunders that people make. Let me get it back, alright? A couple moves. Before black played b6. People usually think that a blunder is when you play something like this, and just without noticing that, white can simply grab the queen in one move. And of course, that is horrible, black would lose the game on the spot. But usually, unless you're a complete beginner, you do not play moves like that. Now, what is a lot more common to happen is when black plays the move such as b6, which is a losing blunder, but the move in itself is not bad. It doesn't lose anything by itself, but it just overlooks this really strong response of white, which finishes the game on the spot. And if you learn to prevent these kind of blunders, the sky is the limit. You instantly jump forward in your chess progress straight away. So if you wish to know how to make it happen, check my free masterclass. I've got it in the links below the video. The following trap is a little less solid, but worth giving a try in blitz and bullet. Here, instead of normal moves such as knight c3 or pawn takes d5, you can defend your central pawn by going bishop d3. And now we're hoping for them to play knight f6, which is quite a common move in general in the French defense, and in this position it is the second most played move. Now, spoiler, the correct move by black, pawn takes e4, certainly is also a good move for black, but it's not a big problem because the position remains to be equal, nothing special. Anyways, after knight f6 and pawn goes to e5, there's this really nice follow-up. After the knight comes back, you then continue with knight f3, they play their standard move pawn c5, but you all of a sudden rush forward into this attack and you team up against this pawn on h7, and in general this knight on g5 is annoying because you threaten something like queen f3, maybe queen h5, with all these threats. So of course your opponent will be thinking, okay, let me just play h6, and now this pawn is out of danger, it can't capture it anymore, plus they hope that your knight will have to go back, but instead you sacrifice it on e6 and win the game. This hits the queen and everything around, they have to take it, but this allows this queen h5 check, the king needs to move, and you continue with one more check from h4. Notice that it attacks the king, but also x-rays the queen right here. So the king cannot easily move here, because then they lose the queen. But if the king tries to come back so that it also guards the queen, then there is this nice cozy checkmate. Sometimes you write me in comments, Igor, it's all good, but my opponents are beginners, they do not play the good moves, and the main lines that you demonstrate here, they play different random variations. So let me show you one of those less common variations, where here, instead of knight to d7 or knight to f6, they go bishop d6. They just decided to complete their development in this way, and then they brought the knight to e7 to avoid all these pins from g5. But nevertheless, what can put the bishop out, and after black castles, thinking that now their king is safe, all of a sudden you sacrifice the knight and win the game. From here you attack the king, even this pawn on h7, so they have to take it, but then after a bishop takes f6, this bishop still pins the knight. And of course the king is exposed. So now you're going to play queen g4 check on the next turn, and that would win the game, because in order to cover, they would have to drop the queen. If your opponent figured it out, they'll try to get out of this pin, so that if you try to check, they can cover by the knight, this way. But you have one more surprise. This time it's bishop sacrifice on h7, calling the king out, and then queen h5 check, and a checkmate. The next trap is classical, it's a must-know, it occurs in the advanced variation where we push the pawn forward, and then they typically try to challenge your center, you solidify it, they put more pressure to your center, you defend it again, and they bring the queen out, adding the third attacker to your central pawn. And then you pretend to blunder it by going bishop to d3. It sometimes seems like just a normal development move, and so your opponents do not expect this to be a trap. But in reality, if they are seduced by this juicy central pawn on d4, then after all these trades, black is happy because they snatched this pawn on d4, but you're also happy because you know that after a bishop b5 check, you're going to win their queen. And if you want to know how I went from 1600 rating to 2260 in only 1 year, check out this video where I explain it all.